welcome to episode 17 of the David Bernard Podcast. I'm joined alongside Fox 8 meteorologist Zach Fradella, and we've been on a little bit of a hiatus from the podcast, Zach, and obviously for good reason, that being Hurricane Ida. Things slowly returning to normal for the New Orleans metropolitan area, but obviously the river and bayou parishes still suffering a great deal. I was down there last week in Lafourche Parish. They obviously suffered the greatest damage from Ida.
Yeah, and this is going to be one of those storm recoveries that it's going to take months. Now, slowly every day you hope to see some progress, which you will. But I mean, a great example of who went through this just a year ago was Lake Charles and Hurricane Laura, and they're still trying to pick up the pieces to this day. So as other areas get back to normal, the North Shore, Mississippi Gulf Coast, the city of New Orleans, we have to think about our western and southwestern areas and the bayou parishes and also the river parishes, because it's going to be a long process for them.
Yeah, and we don't have any official post-analysis done on the storm. We've been getting storm reports in, storm surge, estimated wind gusts, things like that. We know it was a major storm, right? We know it was a Category 4. Likely, this is one of the strongest storms to strike the Louisiana coast going back to the mid-19th century, when we really started to have fairly reliable records of what was happening along the coast.
Exactly, and this is the second year in a row we've gotten hit by one of these 150 Cat 4s. It's just incredible to think that in the history books we've only seen the one way back in 1856, and now here we are with two in back-to-back seasons. So, and like you mentioned, there's going to be a postseason analysis once we get through the off-season. The National Hurricane Center is going to take a look at all of these wind reports. I know we've gotten some crazy high numbers from some of these ship captains and whatnot, and they're going to determine whether this was the intensity that they projected. Was it a little bit stronger? Was it a little bit weaker? But it doesn't change the damage. The damage is catastrophic where that eye wall moved inland.
Yeah, and maybe just for a moment, it's important to explain to people what it means when we have a 150 mile per hour storm make landfall. When we're saying the storm has 150 miles per hour winds, what does that mean exactly?
It's sustained winds, and we're talking, take a minute of gust or take 30 seconds of strong wind gust, and you average them out to be what is your sustained winds, and that's only in a very small area of the storm. I think they think of a hurricane as that whole big blob they see on satellite, and it's got 150 miles per hour winds. That's not the case. It's a small portion of that eye wall where you get those strong 150 sustained winds, but you can have gusts. In this case, I'm pretty sure we did see gusts over 200 miles per hour along the coast. We had official readings of that from some ship captains. Now, those ships can get sort of wind funneling, so it's interesting to note that some of those instantaneous gusts could be a little on the higher side, but the 150 is almost the sustained winds. There can certainly be gusts stronger than that, and that's where you get the damage. Not only where the eye wall was. I mean, look at New Orleans, how some areas you have a lot of heavy damage, other areas not touched that much. That's those strong gusts that come rolling through in literally linear lines.
Right, and as you move inland, the frictional effects of land reduces that amount of wind, which is why you often see the highest winds and the highest wind gusts outside of urban areas and directly on the coast, like around Port Fourchon, where they had that high gust.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as the storm started moving closer to Houma and closer to the Raceland area, going up LA1 and Lafourche Parish, you start to lose the wind just a little bit. But one thing, I'm actually going to do a Tracking the Science segment on this on Wednesday, is the whole brown ocean effect. That if a hurricane makes landfall in the Florida Panhandle, it moves into hills very quickly. If a hurricane makes landfall in South Louisiana, it's marsh, and there's a lot of marsh, and that is a very warm and moist environment, as we all know, living around here. So storms decay slower while they're moving inland into our region.
Well, while the damage is catastrophic outside the levee-protected areas, one of the big stories of Hurricane Ida is how well the levees did outside of the New Orleans area. So we're not talking about our hurricane risk reduction system that covers the New Orleans metropolitan area that, for folks listening, became so infamous during Hurricane Katrina, where we had a lot of failures due to various reasons. But this is a separate levee district that is well to the south of New Orleans by 30 or 40 miles, the South Lafourche Levee District. It protects the communities generally from La Rose to Golden Meadow in Lafourche Parish. The construction on the levees began in earnest in 1976, and they were only built to withstand 3 to 5 feet of surge, but were eventually raised after Hurricane Juan in 1985 caused storm surge of 7 feet rather, and in subsequent years they've been raised even further. The ultimate test, of course, being Hurricane Ida that we just had over the past month. Our guest today is going to be Windell Curole, and Windell is the general manager for the South Lafourche Levee District, and he has been for an incredible 41 years. He has really got some stories for us. He knows the history of this levee district, and he's going to give us a literal blow-by-blow account of what was going on in Lafourche Parish and along the coast during Hurricane Ida. So on that note, let's bring in Windell. Windell, welcome to the podcast today.
Well, thanks for the invite. And, I see y'all every day, but y'all don't see me every day. So that works out pretty well.
Well, I have seen you, and I've been talking to you for at least since the 1990s when I started to show up on the scene. And you are, I'm going to say it, you're a living levee legend in Lafourche Parish. That's a lot of L's.
Well, I've been doing it a long time. It's like you should get a little bit better at what you do the longer you go with it, except in football. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe we'll talk about football later on as well.
I based all of my work on football, competing. We go against hurricanes, and it's learning how to defend. And I'm a defensive specialist, so that's what we do.
That's it. Let's say it has been just about 1 month exactly, almost, since Hurricane Ida. On a personal level, how are you doing at this point?
Well, like most of our people, this was a powerful storm, and as expected, a Category 4 hurricane, and probably going to be Category 5. You have a lot of roof damage, shingles being pulled off, and my house is very similar. My office and my house both had shingles pulled off, so rainfall is going in, black mold, the whole thing. This is the standard thing. You always knows all about this with the storms that have hit there. So, but a great number of our people, the highest winds, Grand Isle, Fouchon, Leeville, and South Lafourche caught the most winds. And so many of our people are going through the same thing that I'm going through. It's just, you gotta, I'm living in a camper. I just about got everything cleared out the house so they can start basically tearing it down on the inside and starting again. And that's very similar to everybody else. So you do that, on Groundhog's Day, remember every day is the same. You wake up on the movie. This is just the opposite. It's like this one day that started the day before the storm, and everything changes as time goes on, and it still seems like the same day because you gotta go to your work, and at the same time you gotta take care of your house and all of the things that involves. So basically, working 24 hours again, very similar. People in y'all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I was in Lower Lafourche last weekend. I went just below cutoff, not quite to Galliano, which I know obviously the farther south you go, the worse the damage was. That was like the real core of the hurricane winds there. But I was struck by, well, not only just the amount of damage, but in some instances, there definitely were some houses that fared better than others. And you can tell some of those had the newer construction. As you mentioned, and we're seeing this even in the New Orleans area, but particularly for you guys, I talked to several people, it's the roofs. That was the real problem. And that's probably something that we've talked about with past storms, but since there hasn't been a windstorm like this in the Bayou Parish in so long, roof mitigation goes a long way in protecting homes.
Again, the most of our people, there was structural damage. I remember I had been working the hurricane for a couple of days, hadn't gone to my subdivision on my house in those couple of days. I'm dreading, what am I going to see? And as I'm driving down the subdivision, I see a ton of roof damage, but I see some structural damage. About 4 or 5 houses. I'm saying, is my house going to be standing structurally? Well, it was like everybody else. I'd say 60% of the shingles were taken off, and about 30% of the felt was gone. So a lot of water, but that was typical of most people. My office was half the roof was torn off. So we had to do our work in luckily, one of the companies, Crosby Tubbs, is allowing us to use their abandoned office buildings to work here. So, yeah, it was terrible. But we say it's a windstorm. Yeah, it was a windstorm, but we had 12 to 16 feet of water hitting up against the levee and slightly overtopping. But we didn't get any flooding from no house or no business flooded from the storm surge. And it was a substantial storm surge in our area. We think, I haven't had a chance to study it real well, but we think the hurricane went on the critical path for our system. And we had slight overtopping, but no homes flooded, no businesses flooded. The only ponding took place in a sugarcane field.
And that's certainly, great news. That's why we build these levees. That's why you're the levee guru for all of these years. We'll kind of get into more about the levee system down in South Lafourche in a second. But for the storm, when Ida was actually impacting, you obviously weren't at your house. Where were you, and what was it like down there?
Well, it was terrible. We started off, but this is our plan. Is we start, of course, the headquarters is at our office, but it's not hurricane proof. I'll put it that way. So we actually go to the largest building that we can get into, and that's basically the hospital. So we met on that Saturday morning, made plans, decided how we were going to deal with things, and 6 of us went to the hospital. So we're there at the hospital. We started at, I think, at 6:30 in the morning at our office and said, "Okay, guys, with the wind start to blow, we're gonna go to the hospital." We did, and the wind just kept getting worse and worse, and we have to operate our pump stations and our floodgates. So we're the group, the 6 of us that were at the hospital, were waiting till the winds to get halfway decent to get out. We tried 3 different times to leave, but it was just the winds were just too powerful. But during that time, a part of the roof of the hospital blew away. Okay, so we had water coming down, and look, the other problem is that I talked to the hospital director, and I said, "Look, this storm, it's going to challenge our system, and nobody can guarantee that the water can come in. So you really need to get everybody out." Well, she called over 200 places to get her patient. She had 5 patients left. And they couldn't get no one took the patients. And the way things worked out, almost in the middle of the storm, some Black Hawk helicopters had to remove those last 5 patients. So that's a real failure in the system to have these people stuck there when they should have left. They wanted to leave but could not.
Well, how much of that had to do with, was that on emergency management's part, like not planning enough ahead of time, or was this pandemic related, Windell?
It's a combination of both. With all the things that have been going on the past year, people realize how much stress it is on the staff. So when they were having to send those patients, they said, "All right, you can send them, but you got to have the staff to go with them." And the staff didn't want to leave, so they were stuck in this jam of having to stay in the hospital. A hospital that the roof goes off, and then a helicopter. Black Hawks have to get these 5 patients out. So it's not the best way to do things. But it's just a combination. Look, that's why it's called an emergency. When you have these storms, things happen that you can't plan for everything. You've got to be nimble on your feet to make sure you handle the changing situations that take place. But this was a water and a windstorm, but luckily we were able to keep the water out. But yeah, we stayed in that, and then finally on the 4th try, we were able to get out. But as we were checking things, we had to use both arms and sometimes your leg to open the door against the wind, and same thing to close the door against the wind. Now, we figured it was still blowing about 65, 70 miles an hour when we first started checking. Now, within an hour of that, that was about 8:30 at night. Within an hour of that, the winds finally dropped to maybe 50 to 60, where it wasn't quite a strain. But our guys had to get around telephone poles to get to, and I got to give them all the credit in the world. The wind's blowing like crazy. You got telephone poles, trees. We had to get to one of our pump stations. There was a trailer, a regular house trailer that people live in, and that thing was laid across the road. And we knew the guy in the neighborhood had some construction equipment, and we called him and asked him, "Could you help with your stuff, your equipment, and get it off the road?" And by the morning it was gone, and we were able to service the station. But we had terrible wind damage, even at our pump stations. One roof completely taken off. Our electrical systems were hurt. But within by the Thursday after the storm, we had everything basically running back to normal. Although we weren't running it in a normal way, we had to get outside generators. We had to do a lot of different things. everything was working, but we were having to work 24 hours to make it work normally.
What about during the storm itself? And I guess you were kind of getting at that. Were you able, what is your real-time monitoring ability of the levee system?
Well, we can call in the water elevations at our pump station floodgates, but that's the other thing. Early in the ball game, everything got wiped out. That's why we don't use the ability to open and close and start the pump stations from a remote situation. You can't depend on electronics when the winds when the storms come. That's what we've always seen that. So we've never converted to a remote operation of the facilities that we have and the functions that we have. We have to be there, but that means you got to go out in the wind sometimes and cut your way through to get the job done. And luckily, the rain wasn't really that terrible for the storm. We got about 3 to 4 inches, which is a lot. But what was really something, those winds blowing from the south, of course, we were on the critical path. In Lafourche, the water actually got out of the bank on the northern side in the cutoff area. The water dropped in Golden Meadow, and you had the similar situations in our borrow canals. The borrow canals themselves went over the bank somewhat in the upper reaches because, again, the winds blow at 130 miles an hour. It makes a big difference. In Terrebonne, because they were on the backside of the storm, they got those north winds, and they had a reverse head. I get this, inside of the floodgate, the protected side, the water came up to 9.5 feet. On the unprotected side, supposed to be the flood side, was down to -4. It's amazing what these winds can do.
And you know, it's incredible that what you're talking about, what happened there in Cocodrie, actually our Fox 8 storm surge model, which is based on AdCirc, which, you know, we don't really show that on air until the last 24 or 48 hours because that's a deterministic model. It was modeling 6 to 10 feet of back bay flooding like that in Cocodrie. It did pick up on that.
Yeah, but that's what you would expect. I mean, it gets a little confusing, but you've got this spinning top going over an area, so your wind shift as it goes along and how long it stays in the area, and that's why every storm is so different. You know, we had a lot of pressure on the west side. We had a lot of debris, and that's another thing. We're dealing with people who have been and worked debris for Katrina and most of the storms of the last 20 years. They're telling me this is the most debris they've ever seen on the levee. And I think part of it is because there's so much marsh around us. The marsh is actually on the levee. It got really torn up. In fact, as I was driving along the levee, it was hard to recognize where I was based on the marsh that I used to see. So that's one of the big things is the amount of debris on the levee. It's a real problem for us. We need to hurry up and get it off. There was slight overtopping, and there was some damage. But the thing that was really different on the outside, the part of the levee that deals with the storm surge, I've seen a little grass damage from the storm. But this storm actually took out the grass and actually did some divots in certain places on the levee. And I've never seen that before. I got to believe that's the intensity of the wind and the wave action, and maybe even the spray causing some of that erosion. But basically, the levee kept the water out and kept us from having that serious problem.
Now, we've gotten some of those preliminary storm surge numbers. Now, you know your entire district. You know all the key points. I mean, have you done some, I mean, obviously you've done some high water surveys. Have you gotten specific numbers? And was it Golden Meadow right at the Terrio floodgate that saw the highest numbers, or was it farther up in the parish?
Well, I don't have the exact numbers, but what I do have is the debris line. Okay. Now, again, this is another thing. Most storms, I have a very well-defined debris line where I can tell pretty much where the water got to. But because of this storm and the intensity of the waves and the wind, I started noticing, I said, wait a minute, looks like 2 debris lines. Okay. And what I figured was happening is we had the actual surge height, and then where the waves were breaking, it denuded the levee. And then the top of the wave was taking debris and actually putting it on the levee, and the wind blowing it even across the levee where it looks like an overtopping in those situations, but it's not. So again, I'm hoping to get with some more expert experience with looking at debris lines from different storms, because that's my interpretation. And I don't know if it's absolutely accurate, but There were places where you could actually tell the overtopping, and that was kind of easy to do. But to have that two debris line situation was kind of strange. So that's what I'm guessing kind of took place. But we know there's a levee near 3235, which is a 4-lane highway in Golden Meadow, and we have a levee right against that road. It's at 17 feet, and just the debris line was pretty consistent there, and it was about 1.5 feet from the top. But I'm getting my engineers, we couldn't even ride on the levee because, I mean, the debris. We did our first tour last week and had 6 blowouts and a couple of times getting stuck. And it took us, normally I can get around the levee system in a couple of hours. And this was from 7:30 in the morning till 5:30 in the evening, nonstop traveling on the levee to get around it. But now we have a little path cleared, so now we're going to start being able to get around and see more. But we think it got up to maybe a run up of 16 feet in some places. And that was in the Golden Meadow area. We think we had some other areas that came close to 15. On the northern portion, on one segment, I think we Intercoastal Canal could have been somewhere between 7, 8, or 9 feet, and that's why the flooding on the north side, our levee is 13 feet. But on the North Shore, the sea, there's a little wall that's out there, and an eye wall, and it's only to 7 feet. And those people flooded on the north side. So that's why I'm guessing it's somewhere between 8 and 9 feet happened on the north side and then the coast.
Do you know, have you heard, I know that the Hurricane Center does a lot of postseason storm analysis, and certainly a lot will be done. A lot of groups will be involved with Ida just because of its intensity and the historical significance. Have you been in communication with them, about them with water lines and things like that?
Yes, in fact, we were in touch for a while. Again, communications were so bad during storm, and even after storm it goes in and out. But that's critically important to me to see exactly what those elevations were, to see what the expectations in the future might be, and to also knowing those elevations and exactly the kind of winds, what we can expect a levee to do. In fact, I'm encouraging. I want to get a real good study on our levee system, just like they did the study on the New Orleans system, why it failed. I want to get some data on why we didn't fail, because this water got to the top. This is beyond the design of our system, and it basically did well. But I'm trying to get as much study on it as possible so we can learn for ourselves, but actually help all of South Louisiana. Sometimes we overbuild and at extra cost deny some elevations to some systems.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that. There was some information you sent over to me last week, and talking about the difference between river levees and hurricane levees, and maybe some prioritization there of what the Corps is requiring, what may or may not be required when we talk about these two different types of levees. But I thought we'd take a minute and just pull back and let's talk about this. I referenced it in the intro here to our podcast. 41 years. You've been with the South Lafourche Levee District. You are the Levee District, Windell. How did this start? How did you get involved?
Well, I was very happy working for the LSU Extension Service as a Sea Grant agent. My training's in biology, and coming from a fishing family, paid my way through college on the shrimp boat, getting out there 18 days and coming in. Also worked on tugs, all the things that people in South Lafourche do. And so there was a friend of mine, Ted Falgo, was the manager of the port, and we went to high school together. Again, and we were both working for LSU Extension Service, and Ted got the job at the port, and he says, "Look, they're looking for a levee district manager." I said, "Well, there'll be a chance to go back home," and I said, "Well, I'm happy where I'm at, but I'll go ahead and take a look." And my job with the Extension Service, you're advising people, but of course, job for the levee district, you're actually doing something. It's more than just advising. And so that was kind of interesting to me. And I met with the leaders, and they decided to hire me, and I took it. And levee boards don't always have the greatest reputation. So I said, well, I'll see how it goes. And I didn't owe any money, didn't have any kids, wasn't married. So I'll say, in 6 months, if I don't like it, I'll just leave. Well, the 6 months turned into 41 years. Okay, and the reason for that, I got to say, is that our elected officials appoint the board members, and they've done an outstanding job of appointing people who just care about the community. That our job is one thing: keep water out of people's homes and businesses. And I tell you, our board focuses on that. That's the only purpose. That's the only answer. That's what we do. And so they don't veer off into other areas. Every decision is made, whether it be a cost decision, who we hire. Everything we do is this the best way to get it done? And that's why I think we've had some success, is because our board members have the focus on doing the right thing, and they allow us to do our work as well as we can.
I'm going to get Zach to talk to you a little bit more about the history of it and how you guys have built it up over the years, and sort of the storm history and how it started with Betsy. But we've got people listening from all around the country and not just here in South Louisiana. And so I wanted to make a distinction because many people around the country are aware of the New Orleans Levee District, so to speak, and which is now, of course, known as the Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction System, as it was coined by the Corps after Hurricane Katrina. But the South Lafourche Levee District, that's a total separate entity, and we're talking, this is an area south of New Orleans. How much territory does that take up exactly?
Well, those people don't think anything exists south of New Orleans, and we're 30 miles south of New Orleans, okay, to start off with. But basically, the system is about 18 miles long and 3 miles wide. So it's like about 60 square miles. But we protect, and this is the diversity area. We have the second largest oil storage capacity in the world at Loop. There's a place in Oklahoma that has the largest. We also have the largest alligator farm in the world. Okay, and then we have some of our offshore companies, the tugboat companies. When they came to do the North Sea, it was tugboats company in the 60s. The tugboat companies from Windell Curole are the ones who did the type of work. So we're down here, and basically we were fishing communities that really got big into oil support, and then later into government contracts. A bunch of the Coast Guard cutters were built just north of here in Lockport. So we're boat people, basically. We deal with water. That's what we do. And so the other big thing is that our community set up this port at the mouth of Bayou Lafourche, Port Fouchon, which since 1995, they've been supporting just about all of deep offshore oil. And that oil and Loop produce about 20% of the fuel that goes to the rest of the country. But not only that, the funds created by that development have sent an average of $6 billion a year to the federal treasury. South Louisiana is about the size of the Netherlands. The Netherlands has offshore oil, and they keep it all. South Louisiana is the size of the Netherlands. But until just a few years ago, we got zero of that $6 billion. And so we serve a big purpose. And of course, the Mississippi River going through New Orleans and Flatland. The Midwest would not be great without the water access to the sea. That's why Thomas Jefferson decided to buy South Louisiana. But we're south of New Orleans, and those are the things that we do. Our population is relatively small, 25 to 30,000 people, but big when it comes to doing things in the deep offshore waters.
And some of my fondest memories, you're speaking specifically in the industry aspect of Lafourche Parish, but some of my fondest memories with my grandpa driving down, through Golden Meadow and whatnot, and going fishing and heading down to Fouchon, going fishing on the side of the road. And so, it kind of gets into, and one thing I'm going to bring up is the history of the Levee District down there and some of the most memorable storms for y'all. He always told me that Juan was a big one, and Juan was a late October hurricane that just sat, and that was a big one that really flooded y'all. Talk about some of the storms throughout the history that you've been with the Levee District. Now, that was before your time, but how they impacted the levee, how they impacted maybe raising the levee, and how did Ida kind of size up to all of those?
Well, I'll kind of start from the beginning of the beginning. I can remember as a 5-year-old, my grandfather telling me about the hurricane of 1893. He was a baby at that time. Half of the population of about 800 people were killed. My grandfather, and mostly the deaths were percentage-wise. Men survived the longest, a little bit extra muscle power hanging on to floating debris. Then the next percentage of loss were women, and then the greatest percentage of loss of life for children. So my grandfather, being born that year, just very, very fortunate to survive. But I can remember, again, my grandfather just spoke French, like most of the adults. And he told me the story of the hurricane of 1893. I was 5 years old, never forgot it. The reason our community is where it is and not on the coast itself is the retreat from the hurricane of 1893. Then the 1915 storm. Now, the 1893 storm didn't affect New Orleans very much, but the 1915 storm, a lot of people had left Shankamanato with 12 miles further north on by Lafourche and Leeville. Well, Leeville was totally flooded by the 1915 storm, and it caused a lot of damage in New Orleans. And then that continued to be the movement north into the South Lafourche area. And then you have Hurricane Colossus in 1956, and then you had Audrey in 57. You had Carla in 61, which hit Corpus Christi, Texas. It flooded Golden Meadow. Okay, it was such a large storm. Then you hit Hilda. We flooded for Hilda. It hit Morgan City. We had the tornadoes in La Rose. I think we lost 23 people to that tornado. That's the greatest loss of life from a tornado was that storm there. And then Betsy, of course, luckily for us, the eye went right over, so we didn't see a lot of storm surge. But of course, New Orleans area, Plaquemine and St. Bernard suffered terribly from that. Then you went along to Juan, 1985, slow moving. So I had just started work in 1980. And we hadn't closed the system yet. We still were tied to parish levees that were only 3 to 5 feet high. And when that storm hit, we had just put in our floodgate that August. Had we not, we had a 7.5 foot elevation at the floodgate. That system was partially completed. There were a couple of holes in the system. It took 3 days to flood, and it flooded to a 4.5 foot elevation. Had we not completed that floodgate, we'd have probably flooded to 6 feet. And then we would probably had some lost lives, but we didn't have any. Just like this storm, remarkably, I haven't heard of it yet. Anybody in South Lafourche died because of the storm, which is a great thing. But then you had Juan, then Andrew. Andrew came real close to the coast. So in fact, not too much damage at Grand Isle, which is 6 miles further north than Fouchon. But Fouchon got beat up real bad because Andrew was a tight little storm, but caused some wind damage in our area, but only 6 foot elevation. Then you get to, luckily for us, for Katrina, headed the same place that this storm hit. And had Katrina done what this storm did, we would have been totally flooded and wiped out. You know, just like Waverly, Mississippi had that 28-foot storm surge. Then Rita hits all the way to the other side. And again, we had north winds. So even though the wind was blowing 100 miles an hour, we only had a 6-foot storm surge for Katrina.
So Windell, let's. So I think the point to make here, though, is that Juan was a kind of a pivotal moment in the development of the levee, and as far as building up the height, right? Well,
actually, it was just let's hurry up and get this ring closed, which we got closed in '93. But it was Rita and Katrina where the Corps said, look, we've got a new 100-year storm, so it's going to be a bigger storm, and we agreed that our levee should be higher. And that's when we said, all right, we put on, when we were in the Fort Supplemental, we went to the people and said, look, give us a 1 penny sales tax. And it was going to put us higher than anybody else around us, but we thought it was critical for the community. And we had 82% approval for that 1 penny sales tax. Now with that, we could continually build every year. The money from the Fed was always sporadic. You know, we could never depend on it. Money from the state was not that much better as far as dependability. But once we had our local tax, it was a 10 mil property tax and a 1 penny sales tax. And I think that's more than anybody else has paid for flood protection. And those together were the core that every year we could do some construction, and we continue doing construction. And we decided we were going to go from 13 on the south end to 8 on the north end. That was the core authorized project. We decided to go 16 on the south end and 13 on the north. And the reason for that is I did a little computer study. What was the highest elevations to hit the Gulf of Mexico? And then what were the highest elevations to hit Louisiana? And Louisiana, when I looked at it, was a 17.9 for Katrina, I think in the Slidell area. But they had only 2 or 3 storms really over 16 feet. When I looked coastwide, you had probably 8 or 9 storms that were over 16 feet. And it looked like it was an amount that our funding could support. And so that's why we decided to go 16 on the south end and 13 on the north. But when we had money available and the projects lend themselves to it. We have some areas built to 20 feet, 19 and 18 feet, and 17, of course. But the goal was to get to 16, and we needed every inch of it to survive this past storm. It put debris all over the top of the levee and inside.
So let's talk about future levee protection and if there's any plans to maybe raise some levees even a little bit higher. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and if I'm putting words in your mouth, you have an ongoing discussion with the Army Corps of Engineers, which you're always having a discussion with the Army Corps of Engineers, right? One way or the other. But after Katrina, when, you made a point, I've read in some of your testimony, you made a point, and we've talked about this many times on this podcast before. The problem in New Orleans, not all of it, like in St. Bernard and Plaquemines, yes, there was overtopping and breaching there. But most of the flooding that occurred in New Orleans was because of the failure of the flood walls, the outflow canals that we used to pump the rainwater out of the city, that was an engineering design flaw. And that the Corps has then now gone back and rightfully so said, hey, these outflow canals have to be designed differently. They have to be deeper structurally. They have to be different in order for that not to happen again. But they're extending that to all kinds of levee protection. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, that's exactly right. After Katrina, the IPET report, and the panel did a lot of interviews. And one of the things I thought they failed in is you had Bob Turner and Stephen Spencer. Bob was with the Lake Levee District and Stephen with Orleans. They gave their testimony, and I don't believe that the committee listened at all to their testimony. Because the committee said there was some piping, which meant some water went through the levee, not over the top of the levee. And these guys are good engineers. They're solid. They're honest. They're about as good as you'd expect. And they didn't take that testimony. But there were three things that the report said. It said that the eye walls needed to be improved because they failed. That the intersection of hard structures like steel and concrete with the earthen levees had some failures and had to be improved. We agreed with that. But they said the levees themselves had to be improved. And we think the basic design, they needed to be higher possibly. But the basic design of earthen structures did not need to be changed. And that's the big discussion and difference of opinion that I've had with the Corps.
Okay, and so just to clarify for everyone listening, we have the river levees. We have our enormous levee system that protects us from flooding on the Mississippi River. And then we have additional levees that are designed specifically to hold back storm surge. And so obviously a river levee should be constructed in such a way that the water is always there, right? The river is always there. Sometimes it's much higher, putting more pressure on the levees. Other times it's running very low, like at this time of the year when it's at a typically low point. So is it my understanding, is this correct, that the Corps is saying that all of these need to be viewed the same? And if the problem then is it could make it cost prohibitive to enhance hurricane levees further enhance hurricane levees or raise them, because you have to have the same kind of engineering design as, say, a river levee.
Yeah, and again, it's important to tell the difference between a levee and a flood protection structure. A levee, when we say levee, we mean an earthen structure. If you put steel or concrete in it, it's no longer a levee. It's basically a flood protection structure, and that's what an eye wall is. And what we found out in dealing with talking to some people that have been doing engineering and geotech work for a long time, when they started building hurricane levees, and in fact, our levee system was the first levee district to be formed strictly to do hurricane protection. But they took the same design for river levees to make your hurricane levees. Well, the big difference in the two is the purpose of a river levee. They have to hold high water back for months at a time. Hurricane levees, 10 to 12 hours at the most, typically, except for Isaac, of course. But typically, they only have to hold water for a few hours. You also have a little bit more wave action or different types of wave action. But talking to that expert that used to work for the Corps, now has a big company doing geotech work, he said they never calibrated one to the other. And then Katrina comes and they put that Mississippi River levee or hurricane levee on steroids and made it even bigger and more expensive. And it's expensive there. Look, there's no doubt that what the Corps has makes very good levees. But if you can't afford to build it, it's not a very good levee if you have nothing. So we're trying to work with the Corps. They're working with us. I had some conversations just a couple of months ago saying, look, we finally built to where we wanted to build. And they've been saying we're not doing things according to the rules. And we don't like doing that, but we have to say, we choose elevation over strength. That's a tough compromise to make. But we've done that, and it paid off for this storm. Had we had a little bit less elevation, we would have flooded terribly bad. But that's the whole thing. The eye walls, we agreed 100% with the study that the Corps did. Those eye walls failed, and that's why New Orleans proper flooded. It wasn't a failure of the levees, it was a failure of those eye walls. And we have restructured our eye walls to fit exactly what the Corps said. Intersection of the levees with hard structures, we agree with the Corps totally. And look, I've been working with the Corps a long time. I learned what I know from Corps people. So I have a real good relationship with those guys that I work with. Some other people, because I don't always do exactly what their instructions from Washington are, we have some conflicts once in a while. But the bottom line to me is put it out on the table. Let's discuss it. I'm always putting stuff on the table. If you can have a better explanation and a better way of doing it, I want to do that. I like other eyes taking a look and commenting on our system. And then if they give comments that are worthy, we'll change them. We're always looking to improve. And we always have to not only build, but you got to keep your eyes on it all the time. Always maintain. If you take your eyes off for a little while, one little change, somebody can go in and cause a problem. Just the conditions around you, like more and more water's coming around our system. So we've totally evolved from when I started in 1980 with some of the things that we've had to do. But what we found is, like I kind of say a lot, elevation is the salvation to inundation. If your levees are higher than the water, you win. If the levees are lower, you lose. And so that's basically that simple fact. But then you got to pay attention and always question. When we go, we question every expert. We question everybody we deal with. When we're building, we question. And when we're finished, we're saying, could we have done it better at a better price so that we can be better on the next one? And we always try to be better today than yesterday, be better tomorrow than today. And I've been here for 41 years, and we continue to try to improve because we never know what the hurricane's going to be. If it's a 28-foot surge that Katrina, we're going to lose. We're never going to win that battle. But we need to understand, anywhere from Brownsville, Texas to Maine, that would have gotten that 28-foot storm surge would have been devastating. New York City, Superstorm Sandy, you know what the elevation? 8 feet. Imagine in 1938, there was a hurricane in 1938 that hit Providence, Rhode Island with a 16-foot storm surge, missed Manhattan by 2 degrees. And now you would have talked about some serious flooding with 16 feet hitting New York. So imagine 28 hitting, it wasn't a Mississippi or Louisiana thing. But in dealing with the hurricane protection, you always got to look at how can you get better and definitely not step backwards.
Well, I think you summed it up pretty well there, Windell. I don't know, Zach, how about you? Do you got anything else for Windell here?
Well, I do have one question, and me and David were talking about this before we went on air with you. There's the new multi-billion-dollar levee system that's going to be stretching from Raceland across through DeSalmon's Parody.
Yes.
Is that going to protect your residents anymore, or is that mainly St. Charles Parish?
No, it's going to protect everybody between the Lafourche Ridge and the Mississippi River Bridge. Okay, it's going to go across. In fact, I was since 1995. I was chairman of the Levee Board Association, the Committee for Comprehensive Hurricane Protection, and our idea was to go from the Lake Pontchartrain Basin to Morgan City and put the majority of our businesses and people behind some type of flood protection. But at the same time, plan that with restoration projects and highway projects and also waterways. If you plan all 4 together, you can maximize the benefits for all of them. But look, when you're living in a subsiding delta, you've got to always look at improving the situation. But that levee is not going to help us. But they're our neighbors. We're all part of the same economic base. Right now, we've been working with Terrebonne with their Morganza project. Actually, I was the interim director for about a year there. But economically we all help each other, and it's a benefit to all of us to be as well protected as possible. But that system will protect that whole basin and reduce the chance of water coming up into that area.
Well, Windell Curole, the living levee legend of Lafourche. You like that? That's gonna be.
Well, wait a minute. Are you calling me a cure-all?
All right.
Well, let me tell you, it's so bad. You got to kind of this dark humor. But I'm thinking we got beat up so bad with the wind that I look and I see nothing but blue. You cross the high rise over the intercoastal, a large bridge, nothing but blue. So I'm thinking we need a new mascot. We're going to be the South Lafourche Tarps On.
You know what? After everything that you guys have been through and South Louisiana's been through, the fact that maybe we can have just a moment here to laugh about it, well, I guess that doesn't hurt.
Yeah, well, you grab
humor.
you grab what you can. But I'll tell you, look, like I say, our board members, our employees went out and have battled their home issues and did their work. And the people of the area, they understood that we helped out by keeping the water out. So, you take this, you take that, and hopefully we can, it's just, build a little better, hopefully not affected. But what's good? There were a lot of people that were hardly affected at all by it. And that's fantastic. And I say we kept the water out. It would have been 10 times worse. And I guarantee you, had we not been able to keep the water out, we probably would have lost some lives. But with what happened with some of those houses, so and I was kind of disappointed that more people didn't leave. When the water's that close to your system and such a threat, I don't want anybody staying in depending on the levee to protect their property. Let it protect, their lives. Let it protect their property. Go to naturally high ground and then come back and deal with it at that time.
All right. Good advice. Windell Curole from the South Lafourche Levee District. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
All right, guys. Good talking to y'all. Have a good day. And let's hope the season is finished, that there's no more storms. Keep them away, please.
We're in the second and third that. Okay. Have a great day.
You too.
Windell Curole, the living levee legend of Lafourche. I just coined that during this podcast. I'm kind of proud of it. I may have to get him a sign actually that says that he can put on his desk there. I've known Windell for over 20 years now. I've got a great deal of respect for him. I know he's very highly respected in the Bayou parishes, particularly in Lafourche Parish, and has been there since the beginning. Pretty much 1980, since the beginning of levee protection in that region. Boy, have they been through a lot. And he briefly mentioned it, but he had substantial damage to his own home personally.
And it's not only him. It's every house basically down there that has damage. Now some are worse than others, but like he mentioned multiple times, they kept the water out. And wind damage is totally different than water and surge damage. And a lot of people ask the question, why do they keep building here? Why? People not from Southeast Louisiana, people from other parts of the country. Why? This is a working coastline. These residents of Lafourche Parish. They work this coastline, whether it be, the shrimping industry, whether it be the fishing industry, or whether it be the oil industry, which look at Port Fourchon. You can't just forget about these areas. And that's the point of why we protect and why they're building these levees. They're trying to continually improve these levees to do exactly what it did for Ida. And that was keep the water and keep the surge out. So, that's one of those things that these people, we can't just forget about them, especially in other parts of the area that we're back to power, we're back to normal life. They need to rebuild their homes. This is not just, there's just camps down there. That's not the way of life down in South Lafourche. It's a working coastline, and these people, they put their blood, sweat, and tears into their work, and whether that be fishing, whether that be shrimping, or whether that be working in the fields or in the oil industry down in Fourchon.
And we're at the very end of September here. Let's go into Zach's crystal ball. Zach, there's a lot going on in the Atlantic, but for the time being, what's your assessment of where we stand right now?
We're good. That's the good news. I don't see anything heading into the beginning of October. Now, last year, before October hit last year in 2020, we were like, okay, once you get past the first week of October, usually your chances of a major storm go down considerably. Last year proved that totally wrong, but we have to see that as an anomaly, meaning it happens very rarely. Climatologically speaking, once we get further into October, the storm chances go down pretty drastically, and it does look like right now the Gulf's going to be quiet at least for the next week to get us into October at the very least.
Yeah, and just to put it in perspective, Zeta was the strongest hurricane to hit the United States so late in the year. So not just was it unusual because of how late it was unusual because of its intensity and the chances of that repeating like that.
And where it was. I mean, okay, a hurricane hitting South Florida from the southwest, that's typical in late October, but not here.
Right. That was definitely unusual. So we're ending on a positive note that at least as of now, September 27th, the Gulf is on the quiet side. A reminder that you can listen to this podcast wherever you subscribe to podcasts. We're on all of them. And if you want to watch it and you're not watching it right now, we have a video version of the podcast, and you can find it at fox8live.com/David. I'm Chief Meteorologist David Bernard, and for Zach Fradella, thanks for joining us. We'll see you here next time.